Hi guys, today I'm going to show you the full process behind finishing this painting, which took me over 100 hours. In my two previous videos, I painted the sunset and the mosque that I visited in Marrakesh, and in this final video, you're going to see the big reveal at the end. So stay tuned! Okay, so first I started by painting the garden, which I thought would be pretty easy to do, except I didn't use enough linseed oil when mixing the paint, so when the paint dried, it started cracking. To fix that, I had to mix some of the green again, but this time make sure to add more linseed oil so that the mixture becomes thick enough. Basically, when painting with oil, you want to use less linseed oil on the bottom layer and more as you add on layers. This is called the fat over lean rule and is really important to respect if you're painting in multiple layers like I am. I made sure to keep using enough linseed oil for the rest of the garden when adding some of the highlights. Every morning I look forward to drinking my matcha, and especially since it's in this mug that I painted and I'm really proud of. Anyways, back to the painting. I then mixed the color for the street and the sidewalk, except when I put the red color on the canvas, I immediately realized that it was going to be too dark. I kept going because that's what it looked like in real life, and I thought maybe it was going to come together if I trusted the process. I thought I would try to fix the color by making it a bit lighter, but it just made the contrast with the red worse, and then I was so tired. Like, nobody talks about how tiring painting is. It makes me so exhausted, but I love it. I moved on to mixing some grays and black for the street, except when I put the color on the street, it was too dark as well, and I didn't want things that have little importance in my painting, like the street and sidewalk, to be the brightest colors and attract more attention than the mosque, which is supposed to be the star of the show. I flipped the canvas to make sure that I was going to get paint all the way to the bottom, because in my previous painting I missed a spot and now it's hard to go back. After I finished this part, I was pretty disappointed because I was sure I would have to go back in once it dries and make the red sidewalk and street less dark. Here you can see in my reference photo that the street is much lighter than how I painted it. I started by adding some light streaks on the road, but I got bored pretty quick and decided to start on the horse carriage. All of the carriages in Marrakesh are the same green color with gold accents and red seats that pop, so I started by blocking out the shape of the carriage in green and then adding the gold details. I love how you feel like you're traveling back in time when you see the carriages, so that's what I wanted to capture in the painting. I like working in really small brush strokes because that's how I feel I have the most control over the details, but I know it can get kind of boring on video, so I skipped a lot of parts here. At the end of the day, I always put saran wrap over my leftover paints and put them in the freezer to try to make them last longer. I feel like this method helped me save a lot of paint that would have otherwise been dried and thrown away. Oil paint can be pretty expensive, so if you know, you know, and if you paint, you can try this trick out to save money. This palette was pretty full, and since I didn't have any more space to mix paint on it, I transferred the paint that I could and started on a new one. I actually only use 3 primary colors and white and mix all the colors on my own, which takes a lot of time, but over the years it's given me a really good understanding of the color wheel, and now mixing colors is second nature. Okay, so then it was time to paint the wheels of the carriage, and if you've ever tried to draw a circle free-handed, you know it's pretty hard to do. So yeah, this took me a while because the first one I did, the bottom of the wheel wasn't even on the street, so I had to redo it way bigger. I had to take a quick dark chocolate break before moving on to the horses, and if you ever find this brand with the hazelnuts, it's a 10 out of 10. Actually, you know what? Let me get one right now. Okay, I'm back. So here I started mixing the brown for the horse, and before putting it beside the reference photo, I actually thought I ate. Like, I thought I was so close to the real thing, but no, it wasn't even close. So I went back and continued mixing until I realized the fur is almost like purple. I don't know, that was so interesting to me to realize. So I started putting down the purple-brown color and blocking in the shape of the horse. You can enjoy this quick time lapse of me doing that. Okay, so once I had the general shape of the horse, which by the way was really difficult to get, I went back to the road that had dried to add some lighter pastel colors and make it look like the sunlight was reflecting off of it. I also want to take a second to share this website I like a lot, which is Google Arts and Culture. And the reason I like it is because you can find any painting with so much detail. And for example, here I'm using this for inspo for the street and the horse, and look how well you can see the brush strokes when you zoom. I saw this painting in real life at the museum and the quality is so HD here, I love it. So yeah, for the road, I don't want it to be one boring color, so I kept adding more and more pastel streaks to make it look interesting. Then for the horses, I started adding more of the details so you can see the muscles and it looks like they're actually in movement. I took a tiny paintbrush for the next part because the hooves of the horses are so delicate, like subhanallah, these creatures have so much power and it's all falling on these tiny delicate parts of the extremity. I'm gonna speed up this part again because otherwise it's gonna get quite boring, but yeah, I kept adding more details with different colors to add some depth. I then went back to painting the body of the horse because I wanted it to look more 3D and real, so I went in with different tones of brown, and up to here it looks pretty good, you know, but I feel like I wanted to add more and more, and at some point the horse started to look like a robot, and from here it's like all downhill for that day. I think part of the issue was that I was trying to copy one of the masters instead of just painting what I saw, so by the end of this I was tired and frustrated that the horse didn't look good. I actually stopped filming and fixed it off camera because I was too overwhelmed. After all that hard work, I thought I deserved a little treat and a real day off before getting back to work. I really like to do something completely different when I'm stuck on a painting so that when I come back, my mind is fresh. We went to have breakfast at Parallel 49 Cafe and I really recommend the Venezuelan coffee because it's the only coffee I've ever tasted that already has a sweetness to it without any sugar. We then headed to Le Biodôme de Montréal because I had never been before. We started by visiting the subpolar region and we got so lucky to see the penguins playing. I really recommend this activity to couples or kids if you're in Montreal, and the fact that penguins were playing and like racing just reassured me and made me think like, oh, they're actually happy here and they're protected. Then all of a sudden all the penguins just stopped racing, so if you ever go and you see them not moving, maybe they're just resting. We moved on to the tropical rainforest, which was a completely different vibe. Like, we actually felt like we traveled to Mexico, and we saw some parrots and some of the cutest little monkeys. Like, look how small they are. And the animals look well cared for, like they have enough space to move around and have different activities, so that was cool. There were different types of fish like piranhas and sharks, and after about an hour and a half, it was time to go back home. We got stuck in traffic on the way back, but hey, that's nothing new for Montreal. When I got back home, I immediately felt like fixing the red sidewalks, so I mixed a color that I thought would clash less with the rest of the painting, and when I put it on, I was like, this is perfect. I always stop filming when I get too stressed about a certain part, so for the horse, unfortunately, I didn't film the part where I fixed the colors and made them blend together. Sorry. One of the parts I love most in a painting is when you get to start adding the little details. I just find that super satisfying. I then went in with a very dark brown to do the outline of the wheels, and for the inside I went in with a grayish white. For this part, I could have started from the middle and drawn the lines going outwards, and I think that would have been less risky, but I don't know why I did it in the opposite direction. To make the centerpiece look shiny, I played with yellow and white colors. After the main part of the carriage was done, it was time to get started on the clouds. For this part, I started with a completely new palette because I was going to be mixing only off-white colors and I didn't want any of the brown colors that I used previously to contaminate the white. Just to give you an idea, this mixing part took about 5 minutes in real time, but I sped it up so that it's only 15 seconds. I first laid down the whitish yellow color because that was going to be the base of the clouds and give their general shape. Then I quickly went in with an orange color for the top part of the cloud because I wanted to keep the bottom of the cloud with that yellow light so that it looks as if the light from the sunset is the one illuminating it. I ended up getting some paint on my hands. I have no idea how because I'm so careful. So to take it off, I used some paint thinner and then washed my hands. But yeah, maybe next time I should use some gloves. Okay, next it was time to move on to the palm trees. I always try to hydrate while working, and I've been loving this kombucha brand. If you find it, you should try it. Okay, so next I painted the palm trees, which were pretty hard to get the color right for because in the original picture I only had the black palm trees against the sun, so I tried to find other pictures for reference. I'm not gonna lie, painting a dark line in the middle of the perfect sky I had done was really nerve-wracking to do because like what if it doesn't look good? There's no going back, but luckily it ended up looking nice in the end. I then drew every leaf individually and went in at the end with this tiny wispy brush and a very light hand to give that effect of leaves getting blown in the wind. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it could get boring, but yeah, that's the final result for the first one. I repeated the same process for the second palm tree, and I made this one taller so that it balances a bit of the effect of the mosque on the left. Because like I placed the mosque in the 1/3 position on the left, and then to even it out I placed this bigger palm tree in the 1/3 position but on the right. For the final big palm tree I did it a little differently because it's actually a date palm, so the leaves look a bit different and are a bit longer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I found through some research because I was wondering why they look different. After the first layer dried, I added a second layer of wispy leaves that were a bit yellowing just to add some depth and a touch of realism to the painting. I also added 3 small palm trees in the background, but these were way easier to do because I already knew how to do the big ones. Up next is where I started painting the Coachman. Okay, so I felt so close to finishing the painting when I started working on the Coachman because he was the last big part and the rest was just going to be little details and highlights. So I was super excited but also a bit scared that I wouldn't get his proportions right. So anyways, I started with the easiest part, which were his legs. I always try to paint from dark to light because it's much easier to place light colors on top of dark ones and blend them together. I've tried doing the opposite before, and what happens is the darks never turn out as dark as they should because they just keep getting blended into the lighter color underneath. So yeah, always go from darkest to light. I redid his head a couple times because I kept making it too small compared to his body, so I didn't film the whole thing, but after that it was time to do the final details and highlights. For the road, I kept adding layers of highlights until I felt like the colors blended together with everything else. Once the Coachman dried, I did a second layer for the yellow highlights, which really added the effect that he was riding towards the sunset. I then repeated pretty much the same process for the horses by adding yellow highlights on all the high points on their left side. I did a second layer of white dots on the metal details to make it look even more like a shiny object reflecting the light. I wanted the edges to have a blurry effect of light bouncing off the horse, so I used a clean paper towel to smudge some of the paint off, and I feel like this technique worked really well to achieve a glowy effect. And since it worked so well, I used the same technique to add highlights on the seat and make it look like sunlight bouncing off the seats. I like how this technique softens the edges while making the seat glow. I needed to add some final highlights to the garden as well because it was looking kind of dull and flat without them. So I added some light green leaves on the edges of each bush. And I also added little flowers just so there's more detail on this side of the painting, and so it balances all the details that are on the right side with the carriage. I felt like there was one last thing that was missing in the landscape, and that was to add some birds. Just like with the palm trees, this part was also really nerve-wracking to do because if I get it wrong, then I have a black smudge that ruins the beautiful sky I did at the beginning. But in the end, I think they came out looking realistic, and I think they add even more movement to the painting. And now for the most rewarding part of the video, seeing each part come together individually in the big reveal. I'm really proud of this painting and I hope you learned some things with me along the way. I hope that by showing this full process, you understand a bit better why it takes so long to finish a painting like this. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It really encourages me to keep making videos for you guys and supports me as an artist. Thank you. Bye.